In this short video lecture, I shall be talking about Chapter 3 from the novel A Passage to India by Forster. I'm doing this for the benefit of my students who are studying with me modern novel as it is included in their syllabus. I have already recorded some of the videos on first chapter, second chapter, and the introduction. Here it is only chapter 3 and 4 that we shall be talking about. Chapter 3 is about being Pukka sahib and being not Pukka sahib. And in that way, it seems that the whole chapter would be about the white people who are counted one by one in this chapter. Mrs. Moore, Adela Quested, Mr. Fielding, Ronnie Haslop, and the collector or the doctors which are included in that. And everyone is trying to establish one thing, that it's not good to talk to the Indians. While these two women and Mr. Fielding, they are of the opinion that if you want to have a good look at India, then you should meet the Indians. Or if you want to see the real India, meet the Indians. But on the other hand, the Pakasa people think that Indians should not be talked about. And if they have to talk, then definitely they should be put off as much as possible. So, in this way, with this theme, the difference between the Indians and the white people, the rulers there, and their thinking about the Indian people, that is the basic theme of this chapter. Let's have a start with this. We know that the last chapter, second chapter, that ended with Mrs. Moore's meeting Mr. Aziz in the mosque, and after that, watching the play in the club, that is Cousin Kate, that is mentioned here. She was watching that play, then she got bored and came out, and ultimately, once again, she goes back and finds that the play is going on, but the things are very hot. The fan is not running properly, other fan is out of order, so that is why the problem is there. She wanted to come back to that, but then she wanted to discuss also with other people that if she wanted to see the real India, what she should do. The only answer was that she should look at the real Indians, the Indian people, only then she can find out. But this was a conflict between her and her son, because her son was not concerned with seeing, looking, finding a real India. On the other hand, Mrs. Moore, she wanted to do that, and Adela Quested also wanted to do that. So, in this way, both of these ladies have come to India, though one of the purpose and mission is to take the marriage between Mr. Ronnie and Adela Quested, but then another one which Mrs. Moore had in her mind, that she wanted to see the real India. Now let's see how this thing proceeds with the passage of time. But before that, a writer spends some time in finding out the moon in the sky, the light of the moon, the beauty of the moon available in the mosque, the moon available outside, the moon available everywhere. It means that in India, possibly looking at the moon and having the moon is important. That creates not only a fascinating shine, but also in the minds of the people, it has got certain romantic tales associated with that. So that is why, in a way, moon is very important. It is important in the Islamic calendar also. It is important in the Hindu theology also. And it is important in nature as well. Because whatever the society may be, moon has been of significant importance to all the people, may it be British, may it be some other people. So that is why moon is being discussed. The moonlight, therefore, is seen by the people. Mrs. Moore is able to see that. Same is the case with Adela, and everyone is happy to see the moon. And they compare the calm and quiet of the moon with the life which is going on beneath that. So, moon is talked about for a long time, and that is why we can say that the writer has spent some time in letting us know that nature description is also his job. And then in this line that I have underlined, he says, let us start with that. Mrs. Quested, for the reason that she was 40 years older and had learned that life never gives us what we want at the moment that we consider appropriate. So, in that way, the writer is trying to give a type of metafiction here, that he's voicing the opinion through Mrs. Moore or Miss Quested, but then he's trying to say one thing, which is most of the time said by the people. One was the thing that the things do not happen the way one wants. Man proposes, God disposes. That's the kind of thing that can happen. Same is the case here, that when you want something to happen in your life at an appropriate time, this won't happen. But it can happen at any time when you don't want actually. So this is the human life, and this can be applied, this can be seen everywhere. So in that way, the things carry on and go on. Let us see further what happens with respect to these two ladies. For example, this yellow paragraph, which begins with Mrs. Moore, it says Mrs. Moore was surprised to learn this dignity not being a quality with which any mother credits her son. Miss Quested learned it with anxiety, for she had not decided whether she liked dignified men. She tried indeed to discuss this point with Mr. Turton, but he silenced her with a good humored motion of his hand, and continued that he had come to say. The long and the short of it is, Hislop Sahib, he's a type we want, he's one of us, and another civilian who was leaning over the billiard table said, "Hear, hear." The matter was thus placed beyond doubt, and the collector passed on for other duties called him. This paragraph goes to reflect the understanding of Mrs. Moore and Mrs. Adela Quested about the behavior of the white man with the Indian. For example, Ronnie had a very bad behavior towards the Indians, and that was not understandable by these two women, Mrs. Moore and Adela. They tried to talk to Mr. Turton also to try to understand why this type of behavior is necessary, bad behavior is necessary with the Indians. The answer comes that Mr. Roney is a perfect magistrate because he got the bad behavior with the Indian. He deals them in a bad way. So, in this way, we come to know that perhaps the good thing, being Sahab, was, according to the white man, to be bad towards Indians, which the women of the English people were unable to understand. So, that is why they were confused, they were in conflict. And Mr. Fielding has also been talked about in the sense that he was in the civilian who was leaning over the billiard table. Both of these people, I mean, the women and Mr. Fielding, they have the type of behavior that they would like to see the real Indians if they want to see India. But on the other hand, Mr. Turton and Burtons and this Mr. Ronnie Haslop, all these people do not want this, and that is why they are different from these people. So, a clear demarcation is being shown to us by the writer that the people who were magistrates, who were officers, they were really Pukka Sahabs, and they were really somebody, trying to put their force and authority upon the people of India. And on the other hand, there was the general public of the English people. They were not that bad in comparison to the colonial rulers. Let us see more things here, like this green one, what says, they refused, they were weary of drinks, and Miss Quested, who always said exactly what was in her mind, knew that she was desirous of seeing the real India. Ronnie was in his spirits, the request struck him as comic, and he called out to another passerby, Fielding, how wants to see the real India? Try seeing Indians, the man answered and vanished. Who was that? Our schoolmaster, government college. So the question is again being repeated. When Miss Quested, whatever she had the quality of saying what she had in her mind, a confident kind of person who can say whatever is in the mind that is being said about Miss Quested. So when she said that she wanted to meet the real Indians, if she wanted to see the real India, at that time Ronnie was upset. He took it as a comic thing, as a thing to be ridiculed and laughed at. He put the question to Mr. Fielding also, and he too supported the same idea that if you want to see the real India, then you should meet the real Indians. Not without meeting, you can understand that. So, in this way, these two ladies who want the real India to be seen and watched and observed by them, they need to meet the people. So, we can expect the meeting of certain people, but Ronnie would not support this idea at all. One more paragraph which begins with, why the kindest thing one can do to a native is to let him die, said Mrs. Calendar. How if he went to heaven? Asked Mrs. Moore with gentle but crude smile. He can go wherever he likes as long as he does not come near me. They give me the creeps. As a matter of fact, I have thought what you were saying about heaven, and that is why I am against missionaries, said the lady. So, in that way, this paragraph goes to show that not only Mr. Ronnie Haslow, but also the wives of such people, for example, Mrs. Calendar, they didn't like the Indians, rather, they hated, they didn't want to come close to them. And that was the difference between Mrs. Moore, Adela Quested, and this woman as well. So, men and women of the white Forlock, they were not in favor of meeting the Indians. However, these two visitors wanted to meet. So, in that way, The question was being asked, the conflict was being resolved, rather, conflict was being created, whether it was possible to come near, to become friend, to be loving, to be kind towards the Indians or not. For example, here also it is said, Fielding, Miss Sturton closed her eyes at this name and remarked that Mr. Fielding wasn't Pukka and had better marry Miss Quested, for she wasn't Pukka. So the difference again is being realized to us about the Pukka Sahib, and in opposition to that, in binary opposition to that, Kacha Sahib. So Pukka Sahib is that Sahib who hates Indians, who doesn't like them, who wants to, pressurize them as a colonial master. So on the other hand, if you go opposite, then somebody who is not that Paka is the person who wants to go close to the Indians. So Mrs. Moore, Mr. Fielding, Adela Quested are not being counted among the Paka, and that is why it is being said that Mr. Fielding is not a Paka Sahib like Ronnie Haslov, like Dr. Turton. Okay, so in this way, again and again, the theme is being repeated: who is Paka Sahib and who is not a Paka Sahib. Then again, the club thing returns, the moon thing returns in this paragraph. We can start with the line number 4, for example, from here. A certain sense of unity of kinship with the heavenly bodies passed into the old woman and out like water through a tank, leaving a strange freshness behind. She did not dislike Cousin Kate or the national anthem, but the note had died into a new one, just as cocktail and cigars had died into invisible flowers. When the mask long and domeless gleamed at the turn of the road, she exclaimed, "Oh yes, that's where I got to. That's where I have been." So this paragraph brings before us nature of Mrs. Moore, or what type of character she's going to be. That she loves the moon, she loves the mask. She though doesn't like anything which is bad. Also, she likes all the things. For example, she likes the drama that is Cousin Kate inside the club. She likes that as well, but she likes more the moonlight, the kinship, the loving people, and the mask, and that is why she loves the flowers. And in this way, mysticism of Mrs. Moore is being indicated because she is being declared a personality who is not a colonizer, who is not a kind of hater, who is all loving, who is a Sufi type, and that is why this type of thing is being propagated about her. So, in this way, the difference between different characters is being shown to us, and we also come to know that the things are happening, the things which are creating the conflict, whether they should talk to the Indian people or not, even if they want to see it. When the discussion takes place between Mr. Roney and the mother, that who was the one whom they met inside the mosque, and first of all, Roney is unable to understand who he was, but with the gestures, with the things they talk about, the indications which Miss Moore tells about Mr. Aziz, he comes to know that he was a Mohammedan. He was a Muslim and he was Dr. Aziz. Though he knows that he could not be Dr. Aziz, he could be somebody else from other side, but then he's convinced that it is Dr. Aziz, it is some Indian to his mother was talking about. And he put her the question again and again whether that Indian was kind, that whether he tried to show some words. I mean, he wanted to put some pressure. And he said that if that Indian has not been good to her, then he should be reporting about her. So in this way, Ronnie tries to prove himself to be an ideal magistrate, white man magistrate. In his heart of hearts, for example, this paragraph goes to tell us that he didn't like it that his mother and his to be wife should be talking to an Indian. But then when they tell that he came with them and he dropped them here in the near the club and went back, didn't come inside, then he realized that he was a Mohammedan and he was the one who had come here, but he could not. So in that way, it is clearly recognized that he is Aziz. What a charming name is being said here. But the charm is only the difficulty which Mr. Ronnie wants to create for him. Otherwise, he didn't like it. But however, he was surprised that the good act was performed on the part of Dr. Aziz also, which the mother was praising, Adela was praising. But he was not ready to accept that anybody who is Indian can be good as well. The chapter is going to close now. I think this is the paragraph that we should be paying a little bit of attention. For example, India isn't home, he retorted, rather rudely, but in order to silence her, he had been using phrases and arguments that he had picked from older officials, and he did not feel quite sure of himself. When he said, of course, there are exceptions, he was quoting Mr. Turton while increasing the izzat was Major Clender's own The phrases worked and were in current use at the club, but he was rather clever at detecting the first from the second hand and might press him for definite examples. So this paragraph again goes to show that some of the Indian things are recognized by these people. For example, here is the word izzat, the honor thing, which is played by these people. Sometimes they like these words, sometimes they do not like, but however, these words are used. So some of the Indian cultural impact in the shape of language and word that is also coming up. And the way the magistrate type of people try to influence other people, that is also talked about here in this paragraph. And in that way, we shall be reaching very close to chapter 4. Chapter 4 is not that important, which should be discussed. Just a few words we can talk about this chapter. That this chapter gives us a few ideas about the hope of the friendship between the Indian people and the white people. The hope is very meager, very little, though the Indians are good towards the white man, but the white man definitely is not that good because he wants to maintain his status, his procedure of ruling over India as a colonizer. So in this way, there is no that special need to go through the text of this chapter and try to understand. Next time, we shall be recording a video on chapter 5. However, the students are expected to go through chapter 4 also to understand which characters are mentioned, which places are mentioned in this part of the novel. So thank you very much everybody for watching. If you like this video, if you understand something out of that, do not fail to hit the subscribe button as well as the like button. So chapter 3 and 4 end in this. Hope to see you in some next video very soon. Thank you for watching.